Welcome back to Restless. I'm Father Joseph Gill, priest of the Diocese of Bridgeport, and you've joined Diane and Paul and I, and me, and I, which is
And
the
me.
proper grammar.
Wait,
and me?
You have
joined
me.
You've joined. Yeah, sorry, my mom's gonna call me on this one.
Yep.
Love the grammar.
Back to grammar
police,
school.
I'll tell you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's. Anyway, you've joined us as we discuss some interesting topics about our Catholic faith. And one of the most fundamental topics, of course, is you can't be Catholic without believing in God, right? It's kind of step one to being Catholic. And but of course, there are a lot of people out there who don't believe in God, the atheists. And that's really been on the rise in America. People who identify as atheists and write books about atheism and even have started atheist. Have you seen the atheist churches that have arisen?
Unitarian churches? No, I'm sorry.
Ooh.
Is that bad?
No,
Should I
it's
say
not.
that?
It's not untrue.
Well, because if you believe in everything, you believe in nothing.
Very true. Very true. Yeah. No, but the atheist churches are people that are officially atheists, but like the idea of getting together to hear an inspirational message, have community, and sing songs.
I guess it doesn't surprise me, given the
surprise me
atheist
at
community
all.
on Reddit and the internet these days. They all kind of seem to want to convene.
Atheism is. I
Yeah.
think atheism is a religion. I think the nuns is
N-O-N-E-S,
N-O-N-E-S.
not N-U-N-S.
No, not the nuns. Yeah, not the religious sisters. I think the nuns are probably probably the ones that are in more despair, I would say, sometimes.
But aren't nuns atheists? Or is there a difference?
No. Yeah, no, there's not a difference. There's a difference in approach, though. Right? Because you have people that are just like, meh. Do you believe in God? Meh.
So,
Like, they
they're
don't
not
know.
even-
Well, I
they're
guess-
not even.
And as opposed to,
More
do you
like
believe in God? No, I'm an atheist.
So there's
it almost
no-
becomes a religion.
They're not even wrestling with the question.
They're not even
saying.
wrestling
Like,
with it. They're like, well, it doesn't
doesn't make a difference
It doesn't
in
make
my
a
life.
difference in my life. Yeah, which it's something like, I think atheists struggle. Some atheists really do struggle with it. The person I've known who's like personally known, who's the biggest Bible scholar, was an atheist. His name was Frank,
Wow.
and he came to our Bible studies and he came to our things in college that were like supposed to be evangelical and bring people in to ask questions. We had this thing called Questioning Christianity where you could come in and ask questions. We had Bible studies, and Frank would religiously be there. No pun
no
intended.
pun intended.
And he had his Bible, and it was the most beat up Bible you've ever seen, and he knows every single thing in that Bible. He's also like computer programmer and like kind of Mensa-esque, but like savantist, so he could just know things. But he was he could quote, like somebody could say something and he would know exactly where that is in the Bible. It was incredible.
Wow.
So he was an atheist, but he was wrestling. You could tell he was wrestling with it.
But you said
He's thought about it.
He did become a Christian or no?
No, well, maybe, I don't know.
Oh, so he's still potentially still an atheist.
Yeah, I mean, this is 12, 13 years ago. I don't remember. But
That's interesting.
yeah,
Interesting.
so far as I know, I didn't keep it. I wasn't like friends with him. I just knew of him.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
And so I would say atheists have really thought about it. And maybe there's something good about that, because maybe there's been seeds. I mean, then you reject it. That's probably worse. But with nuns just being like, meh. I'm shrugging my shoulders, by the way, which is hard to see on radio. Then I don't know. That seems worse to me for some reason. They both end up in the same,
But
and they both end up in the same like position at the end of the day, potentially.
But I think a lot of the nuns, maybe nuns because they don't believe in organized religion, but they do have a relationship with God. They do have a belief in God, and sometimes they even pray.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. I mean,
Sometimes.
nuns is a big category.
It's a big category. I agree with that.
It could be-
yeah.
yeah,
It could be
people who
Franciscan or sorry.
Boo!
It's a wide spectrum.
Right.
I think a lot of people too claim to be atheist, but atheist, you're making a claim, right? That God does not exist. That's your assertion. I know that I've talked to people, and the more that you dig, it's I found a lot of my friends are more like agnostic leaning. I think that atheists kind of have a higher responsibility, right? Because if they're going to make that claim that there is certitude that God does not exist, well, what are your arguments?
Yeah.
It's certainly harder to argue than agnosticism.
It's very common to see I'm spiritual but not religious.
Yes.
And I
that's
always
the-
ask, what does that mean for you? And you're like, well, I just believe that there's a force. There's something about it there's just something there that's helping us along, and something bigger than me. I'm like, and what's that? Oh, I don't know. I'm spiritual.
Well, a lot of that's sentimentality.
sentimentality.
You know, it's kind of.
I agree.
But so I'm curious about the atheists that you've known and encountered. What reasons do they give for not believing in God?
Rationalism.
Science explains everything is the biggest one that I hear.
Yeah. Or it's like the new atheists, like the Sam Harris, and we have a Sam Harris in the Catholic community here in Stanford. And
Thankfully, spelled differently.
but it's a common pun. Anyway, so Sam Harris, the actual the new atheist, and so he says that, well, any morality that we have can be explained in ways outside of religion, because there's always that issue where it's like, well, if you have no religion, how do you have morality? And there's a whole line of belief that morality is
Evolutionarily determined.
evolutionary, which there might be some truth to that, but I don't think it's
sure.
But it's certainly not the whole truth, because we're like terrible and wretched and sinful, and so somehow
But even
the evolution hasn't helped us with that.
yeah, even though I think it's, as Diane, you were saying, that they believe that science can explain everything. But I mean, I think science still has so many questions. And
That's okay though. I don't think that's a good argument though.
no, I don't think so either. Because then you've ever heard of the God of the Gaps argument?
Yeah, exactly.
It's God of the Gaps means that like anything you can't explain currently, you just ascribe to God.
Okay.
Right. So like hundreds of years ago, they'll say thunder. We don't know what it is. It must be God. Like, well, no. Okay, now we actually know what thunder is. It's the
It's Zeus.
expanse. It's Zeus. Yeah. Right. Zeus or God bowling.
God bowling.
I think that's what we always say.
I mean, I think that's what like parents tell their 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds when they're scared out of their minds.
Oh, I was told that when I was 18. No, I'm just kidding.
Right? You were homeschooled too, so
I was homeschooled. This is totally random aside. Has nothing. Total tangent.
tangent.
But this is a tangent, right? But I was talking with somebody who was telling me that his older sibling goes to Thomas Aquinas College up in Massachusetts, and
Very good college.
a very good college, but a college of like a lot of ex-homeschoolers. And they had a friend who genuinely believed, but when they got to college, that babies were made by holding hands,
Well, I mean,
which I guess can't be proven otherwise. But that's why I try to avoid holding hands of beautiful women.
okay, that is a tangent.
Anyway, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. But the God of the Gaps argument, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, we can kind of understand now that there are a lot of things that may be explained by science in 15 years, 50 years, 100 years, right? So you don't want to fall into that trap
Correct.
of saying
People
like,
don't see the supernatural as real, right? They see it as a fantasy. So I've heard, like one of my friends in particular, she's just not concerned about it because she doesn't believe in the supernatural. So for her, everything, what is real is what she can see. And that's it. That's where it stops.
Well, Marx famously said, although it's generally quoted in such a way that's not accurate, but he said that religion's the opium of the masses. And he said, and that can be exploited.
oh, is that the other side of that?
Yeah.
Well, just like everyone forgets Nietzsche's second half, right? Nietzsche said God is dead and we have killed him.
That's correct.
And I don't know if he was lamenting that fact or celebrating it, but
And nothing shows that more than the Russian Orthodox, not all priests and stuff, but the political aspect of the Russian Orthodox Church during the Soviet Union.
sure.
It was perverted and changed. Unfortunately, it's the same in a lot of like
KGB members and
and it was just a wing of the KGB almost.
well, now we
Soviet
see
government.
that in the Chinese Patriotic Church,
Yep, same thing.
China,
Same
right?
thing. Korea and North Korea, not South Korea. North Korea.
North Korea.
Yeah,
If is there a church in North Korea?
there is.
Is there?
There's a Catholic, scare quotes again, radio, scare quotes, Catholic church in Korea.
Really?
Korea.
Really? Is it run by the government?
Oh, everything's run by the government.
Oh wow.
Or authorized and monitored by the government.
Yeah.
There's a special Bible in China,
I've heard that they take out certain elements that don't fit in with,
or they change them
party
such that
line.
it fits into the Communist Party line. And so it's hard to like smuggle a Bible into China,
the real one.
a real Bible.
Yeah, that makes sense. So back to atheism, especially talking about China. There's certainly a lot of atheists in China. I think that's probably the major religion now in China. So I mean, so just this like materialistic worldview that the only thing that exists is the material world. But how can we talk about the desires of the human heart though? right? I mean, since the beginning of time, human beings have built temples and tombs, right? That was a lot of some anthropologists once said those are the two signs of a civilization, is when they build temples and tombs, because we recognize that there's something more after death,
Yeah.
and we mourn our dead, and we want to worship.
Aren't the desires of the human heart like good sushi and Netflix? It's a joke, but it's also kind of true.
What do you mean?
Right? Well, you would say, well, what's the desire? If you were to ask, grab your socialite in Manhattan, what are your desires? What's the desires of the human heart? Now, they'll either give you they'll probably give you two varieties of answers. They'll say world peace or some wide end of climate change, taxing the wealthy, some big platitude. Or they'll say something the other end of the spectrum, just like
some
stuff you do every day.
Hedonistic like
things.
Physical pleasure.
Correct. Yeah.
Really? I mean, have you...
I would say that those are two. That's kind of what I have experienced.
Wow.
Like what's the desire of the human heart? End of war. It's like, well, okay, I guess.
Well, yeah, and I think it's just a.
But it's not. Is it your heart? And what are you going to do about it? So anyway.
Go ahead, Diane.
Well, this is the whole importance I just went to a talk on theology of the body, right? And it's understanding where we came from and where we're going, right? So Christopher West at this Made for More event, he was talking about, he gave, I'm sure you've all heard the quote from C.S. Lewis. I think you were kind of alluding to it, Father Joseph, but it was, if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. But what Paul is kind of saying is, or maybe I'm interpreting this, but this is what I see in my secular friends and coworkers and everything, is that everyone experiences this desire, like this, they're seeking fulfillment, right? But I think people often stop at the,
sushi and Netflix.
The sushi and Netflix, because they don't understand that they're made for God, they're made for more, and so there's this digging that you do, and you dig yourself further and further into a hole because you say, okay, I've watched Netflix for 5 hours. Well, I'm not feeling fulfilled, so I'm going to watch another 2 hours, right? So like we're constantly trying to fulfill this desire with things that are never going to fill. But your brain, if you don't believe in the supernatural, you don't believe in God, you don't understand your mission and vocation, you're always going to think that I'm just not doing it right. I just need more of this,
Right.
Yeah.
And so that just manifests in more of Netflix, more of, you just go out into the spectrum, and that's what addiction is.
Right.
Yeah.
I heard that there right now on YouTube, there's about 35,000 years worth of content.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So like you could spend your entire lifetime watching YouTube and literally never
Yeah.
get bored. I mean,
I'd
be
get bored.
I'd be super bored.
Yeah, yeah.
Most
Well,
of the
then you
cat
just go to some
videos,
other social media app,
Right,
and
right.
waste time.
I think that's a good point. I don't think people are necessarily even looking for fulfillment a lot of times.
They're just looking to numb the pain or numb the.
No, they might not even know that they're in pain. It's kind of an interesting way of thinking about it, right? Because they're so distracted that how do they even know who they are?
Yeah, you need time to reflect on that.
Right. So, for example,
Silence.
I was out in Utah visiting my friend, and we skied all day, and it was terribly awesome but painful and tiring day of skiing.
Why was it painful and terrible?
After a full day of skiing, when you're really steep, again, radio, using my hands, you can't see how steep it is.
It's a good workout.
It's a good workout, yeah. And so you go into hot tub afterwards. But there's like a communal hot tub at the apartment complex down in Salt Lake City. And there was this new person who moved from New York to Utah, and she was in the hot tub, with this whole group of people that were just, whatever. And she was talking to us, but the entire time she was talking to us in the hot tub, she was scrolling TikTok, and I could kind of see it on her phone. And so while she's talking to us, she's still going. It's still going.
I'm just kind of amazed that she would use her phone that close to water.
But they're
Not gonna lie.
They're waterproof now.
Are they waterproof?
They're
now?
waterproof now, yeah.
Oh, dang.
So it's like, so she couldn't break. I feel bad for her. Like she couldn't have a conversation. And she's like, well, maybe I should get a motorcycle. Should I get a motorcycle? And she's still going. She's still scrolling on the phone.
Yeah, it becomes like a tick. It's like they're calming,
Yeah.
sort of. Yeah.
It's like, how does she even know if she's uncomfortable?
Huh. Interesting.
It's distraction.
So that's, I mean, obviously that's one way in which we will lose our connection with the divine is
Right.
to numb the desire that's in our heart for the divine.
Right. And one of I just had this concert with a famous composer, a concert band famous composer. And we had a joint concert between Westport Community Band and Greenwich High School Band. And they, and he said something to us, just the Westport people, like the older people, that was, it's so different now when you teach kids, high school kids, music, because in the past they would light up, you could see the emotion, you could see they could smile, they talk, even like they try to talk to each other, even though you're not supposed to during rehearsal. It says, but now they just are glazed over. Partially probably because of COVID, because these kids would be, have gone through COVID in middle school or high school. But he said they're just motionless. They're just emotionless beings that stare at screens all day in the classroom, whether it's productive or not. They're just staring at screens all day.
Yeah.
And they just don't have they don't have emotion. I was like, oh man, that's so sad.
That is sad.
Like, at least be in there and not want to be there. Like, I can't believe my mom is making me do music class. I don't want to be here. I want to be in study hall. It's like, at least have that emotion.
Yeah.
The other thing too is that we live in a society now where we're so used to getting things like the tip of our fingers, right? I mean, everything is immediate. So Christianity, I mean, it's a religion of the cross, right? And so nothing on the path to eternal salvation is going to be easy. And I think that people sometimes they do recognize that, and they reject sort of just, it's kind of the laziness factor, right? Of like, well, I'm not going to put in all of this effort to, to transform myself. And I think people do interiorly are discouraged, but they just, there's all these numbing agents that you really don't have to. If you don't make an effort to sit in silence, sitting in silence can be scary, because it's like you come to terms with, okay, why am I here? You have to ask yourself those hard questions. But I think in the world that we live in today, with all of this social media, and constant just technology, looking at our phones, our computers, people are not creating that space to even, to your point, Paul, to ask those questions.
Unfortunately, I think that George Orwell was less right than Aldous Huxley. So George Orwell wrote 1984, and Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World.
Sad to say, I never read either of those books.
I read half of Brave New World.
Okay.
But I know the story.
1984.
They're great. So
it's
one and a half books.
guys.
Yeah. But I understand the story. So in Brave New World, it's basically like humans exist to have pleasure. At the end, and there's a massive government that creates lab babies, and they need people to work and do things. And so they either engage in like sexual pleasure, and once that's exhausted, and if they start to get sad at their work, then they take Soma. And Soma is a drug that makes you happy. And that's essentially what we have in society now, where if people are unhappy with their lives and things like sexual pleasure or Netflix or YouTube or whatever don't work, then a lot of people are turning to drugs. And it could even just be like marijuana, which I don't say is only, but it's, whatever.
Yeah, but it's legal.
It's legal in
Connecticut,
most places now. Yeah. So even that, and so we seem to be falling into more of the Brave New World rather than 1984, which 1984 is more about like Big Brother and government control and spying and all that. So, and I think the Brave New World vision is way more sinister. It's way worse almost, because the culprit is almost ourselves.
Yeah.
And allowing that to happen.
Well, I don't think we would ever see an American Revolution again.
People are too lazy.
No.
Yeah, people are too lazy. We would never get so worked up about one cause that we think is righteous that we wouldn't care.
Right. And when you see, I mean, I don't like right now as we're recording this, there's like massive protests going on in France and Israel. And to some extent, I'm like, oh, that's such a pain. Like, people are not going to be able to like get to work and stuff. And I'm glad I'm not in Paris. But, on the other hand, it's like, well, at least there's people that have emotions that are willing to like leave their couches and go fight for something, whether or not I agree with it or not.
True.
They increased the retirement age in France, and they are trying to do judicial reform in Israel, and both aren't going particularly well right now. So, any case, that's my opinion about that.
Yeah. No, I think laziness is an important factor. I know a couple atheists, and I think there's two kinds of atheists. I think there's the atheist who has wrestled with it, Paul, as you mentioned, like those who like have just come to the conclusion logically, like for themselves, that they can't believe in God. But I think the majority of atheists that I've encountered are those who are either looking for an excuse not to believe, or just are too lazy to practice.
Agreed.
You know, and it's it is kind of convenient because if you don't believe in God, then you kind of do make your own morality in a sense. So why bother with the cross? Why bother practicing, especially the counterculture virtues? Because like there's some virtues that everyone likes now in our culture, like kindness and tolerance, which are good and necessary. Tolerance is probably not a virtue, but
I think kindness is also overblown. No, I'm serious. Like you're not like parents aren't kind to their children when they're punishing them, but they're loving.
Yeah,
We're called to love people, not be kind to them. Like Jesus
niceness
wasn't
is not a
particularly
virtue.
kind to the Pharisees and people when he would put them in their place.
No,
but he was loving them.
That is true. It's at the same time, it's a hard world out there, and being kinder than necessary is a good thing.
Kind when it's the best option.
Yeah. But anyway,
as opposed to rude when it's the best.
I mean, there's
never a really particularly good option. But.
No, but there are times too. There's some virtues that are very much with our culture, and some virtues that are very countercultural, right? Chastity, courage, these things that cost us something, a great deal. And so those are the ones that people who are atheists will say, well, it costs too much to practice these virtues, so I will just simply rid myself of the one who commands me to do that, which is God. Rid myself of belief in him.
Yeah. It's so sad.
Yeah.
So how do we counter that? How can we, if we know an atheist, or actually let me first back up and ask, was there ever a point in your life where you struggled to believe in God's existence?
No, not for me.
There's probably periods, I would say, where I was not as concerned with it. But I never didn't believe.
That's good.
As far as I know.
Yeah, I can't say I was ever an atheist.
Yeah, I mean, from reason alone, I think that you can, come to the conclusion that God exists. Obviously, divine revelation is another story in terms of like you would never get to the Trinity on your own. But, there's certainly, I think that it's good to be educated sort of in apologetics and things that atheists bring up. I mean, the problem of evil, that was certainly something that I was curious about, and
right, which is fundamentally, if there's a God who's all powerful and all good, then why is there evil, right?
Yeah.
Because that either means he can't prevent it or he doesn't want to prevent it.
right.
So how would you answer that?
I mean, ultimately, we have free will, right? So God doesn't, he doesn't, suffering is not, he doesn't want us to suffer, but we're fallen human beings. And so the result of, original sin is the fact that, there is suffering and death in this world. And yeah.
So is it free will when, babies die of cancer?
No.
Right. So, I mean, that's
Yeah.
how they would counter it and say, there's a lot of suffering that's not involved with people's choices.
Right. I guess you would say that that's just death as a consequence of original sin. But if you,
If you don't believe in God, then original sin.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a kind of a circular argument. But yeah, I mean, these are things that I'm certainly growing in, but apologetics is, I think it could take a lifetime to kind of, to be able to respond to all of those types of arguments.
Yeah, I think that for me practically, I think other people are different, but first of all, it's trying my best, and I'm not always the best at this because I'm kind of a abrasive brute. But like modeling
Kindness is not a virtue.
I didn't say that.
Kindness is not an important virtue.
Well-placed kindness is a virtue. Love is a virtue.
Love is a virtue, yes.
Charity. Yeah. Okay. So in any case, that like modeling the Christian life is a good first step, which means generally that you're joyful in your suffering.
That's
really hard.
countercultural.
And it's very countercultural because now people love to post themselves on TikTok being miserable.
Do they
Mad
really?
at the world.
Really?
Oh, yeah. There's all types of like rant videos on TikTok, apparently. I don't have TikTok.
Oh,
I know this from secondhand.
just watching that girl in that hot tub.
I don't know what she was watching, but it was
He saw a
something.
lot of videos.
I don't know if
that
it was.
day.
I should actually. I don't know. I don't want to give ByteDance too much credit, but it could have been Instagram or some other social media.
That's
for all
fair.
I know.
That's fair.
I'm using TikTok as a Kleenex type term.
And for everything that's wrong with the world.
Right.
It's all
And so, anyways, I think
TikTok.
modeling a Christian life and meeting people where they are, understanding their stories is like you got to do that first. You shouldn't just be like, oh, you don't believe in God? Well, here's Thomas Aquinas.
But
Not going to work very well.
But the modeling the Christian life, I think there has to be a countercultural element to that, right? Because simply just like holding the door open for somebody might be very kind and a truly Christian thing, but a pagan could do that too.
Correct.
But having like 10 kids, that would raise some eyebrows, right? Or having, living a celibate lifestyle or, yeah, something that would be so out of the
Yeah.
ordinary.
Well, I literally saw shock on my coworker's face. Now these are new coworkers, by the way. They don't know my old coworkers. They don't know what to expect anymore.
They're not
They actually expect anything.
Oh, really? Because I thought
Yeah.
they wouldn't be shocked by you anymore. Then.
Right. That's my point. Right. They don't. They're like, oh, well,
It's him.
just
He's
yeah.
the religious freak.
Yeah. Well, he is everything. But anyway, he's the abrasive
Just the
brute.
freak.
Yeah. No. But I said like, Paul, do you want to come? They're Catholic by background. Do you want to come at lunch? We're gonna go to St. Patrick's and get ashes. And I had a meeting regardless, but it was like, well, no, I'm gonna go to mass later. And they're like, there was just like this shock on their face, like, what do you mean? There's mass? I'm like, yeah, and I don't know. That was my experience.
Get ashes
That's
and
comparable.
Jesus at the same,
Yeah,
same
right.
service.
It's like, well, the ashes are. You actually don't need to get ashes on Ash Wednesday,
That is one of the biggest misconceptions in
right?
the world.
It's true, right?
today.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not
Like
a holiday of
if you had the
obligation.
option of going to mass without ashes, which I don't know why you would have on Ash Wednesday, but just let's say, and just getting ashes, I would say the preference would be to go to mass.
Heck
right?
yeah.
Right?
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
yeah. So, but
Yeah,
generally you'd
totally.
get both.
100%.
But in any case, so that was like the shock. So there you go. There's a little countercultural.
Yeah, and
That can be, sure.
I agree too, because sin sin makes us less human. So if you can live a life of obeying God's commandment, right, and you ultimately everyone sees them as like, oh, the Catholic Church with all these rules and regulations, so stringent, but like the commandments are meant to set us free, right, and to give us true joy and true freedom. So I think people who are striving to live virtuous lives really do. It's not a fake thing. You actually reflect that freedom and the abandonment to God, right? And people do wonder about that. I certainly see it at work. I think, Paul, the biggest thing that you said, the most important, is probably just that finding joy in suffering, or just the trust and abandonment is something that makes people very curious.
Yeah, yeah. I used to have a very good friend who was an atheist, and he's I guess maybe still be an atheist. I'm just not friends with him anymore. But he and I took a couple of backpacking trips, one to Yosemite, one to Glacier National Park, and it amazed me. And we'd have a lot of deep conversations on these trips, and it amazed me how seeing the wonder and the grandeur of nature did not bring him into faith. Because for me, that is kind of like the bedrock of
It's transcendent experience.
it's very transcendent.
It's the same thing with good music.
Yeah,
It's a similar experience.
any beauty, anything. Like, I mean, Thomas
Yeah.
Aquinas talked about how truth, beauty, and goodness are the ways to God, right? So encountering any of that in any form, truth, beauty, or goodness, whether it's the example of Mother Teresa or,
right.
beautiful
Yeah.
cathedral.
In the order of the world, just like the human person, our body part, like
Right.
it's just
Well, to go back to my numbness thing, I went to Grand Canyon. I went to 3 national parks last year. And for me, just being at the Grand Canyon, just like staring at it for a while is great. But you see people go there. They go to the edge. They take their selfie. You see them do this, meaning they're like, I'm again,
Posting
radio. They're posting it on wherever.
He's currently moving his thumbs very rapidly
Right.
over a blank screen.
And they walk away. And that's it. They go there, they get a picture, they walk away, and then go get a beer. I'm like, wow.
You have to be in awe and wonder.
Right. Or they're on a hike and you're hiking. Okay, it's steep. Like Grand Canyon, when you hike the Grand Canyon,
Yeah,
it's very steep and
Heck
you go
yeah.
straight down,
And if you make a mistake, you die.
potentially. Especially the Angels Landing? No.
It's not an ironic
no.
name.
No, that's at Zion. The Angels Landing is at Zion, which makes sense. Utah, whatever.
Zion. Mount Zion.
Yeah. Anyway, I forget what the one is called at K-Bob, North K-Bob Trail, whatever it's called. But anyway, so when you go there, like that one, you can die. But you see people hiking on their phones, not paying attention to where they're going or who they're running into.
That's unfortunate.
It's so unfortunate. So even maybe not what you just said. So you just said the grandeur of
But you have
nature?
to be there. You have to be present.
right, and you
in
can't
it.
just
And
look
for-
at it through your 4-inch screen.
Right, you have to be present for a long period of time. I think of the example of St. Patrick, right? He came to when he was captured in a raid,
Right.
brought to Ireland. He was, kind of a lukewarm Catholic, didn't really care. And then it was the 6 years he spent in the beauty and the rawness of that nature. If you've ever been to Ireland, it's beautiful, but I mean, it can be rough.
Yeah.
Whipping winds and freezing mist, and that's a harsh climate. But he was in awe. It was that time away from everything that was comfortable, just to be with God. It's amazing.
Yeah.
He turned to God in all of that.
Yep.
But
So,
yeah, atheism.
so what do we do about it?
So what do we do about it?
You're a priest. You're supposed to be good at this stuff. Actually, your primary mission is to minister to the church, right? Not to the fringes.
Well, in a sense, yeah. In a
Right.
sense, your job
I know.
as laity, and
That's
you
our priestly mission, right?
right is to take Christ to the nations, right?
Right.
I think your job then is to get people to ask those fundamental questions
That's a good first. I agree.
about their lives. You know, why are you here? What are you doing? Where are you going?
Serve God.
Are you happy? Are you, ask them that question. Are you happy? Are you fulfilled? What do you think is missing in your life?
Yeah.
And here I want to share with you what I've found to be missing in my life, and that is God.
That's great.
That's great.
Well,
That's a good first start.
Yeah, that's the first step. That's the first step.
Plant the seed and get them to think.
First start. That's not the way right saying.
First start.
First start.
First step.
That is the way you start.
Yes. Amen. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thank you for joining us in this episode of Restless. Indeed, deepen your faith and your knowledge. We didn't even get to talk about St. Thomas Aquinas' 5 proofs.
That
So
should be an episode.
that should be an
We
episode.
should have
and
Matt
maybe-
Spraz on that one. 'Cause
Yeah,
he
we
probably just learned. He probably just spent like a year on each one.
Something like that. Yeah. So I'm going to give you all homework, all you listeners out there. Your homework is to go look up St. Thomas Aquinas' 5 proofs and then try them on an atheist. No, I'm just kidding. You can do that. You can do that part if you want.
Try them on yourself.
Try them on yourself, right? To deepen your own appreciation for the existence of God. There are rational reasons why we know God must exist. Not just the truth, beauty, and goodness, but real logical proofs for his presence. Thanks for joining us in this episode of Restless. You can find it on Veritas Catholic Network at 1350 AM and also 103.9 FM and wherever you get your podcasts. So tune in next time.